Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another edition of The Weekly Pessimist, a Mississippi State-centered podcast here on the Running Up the Clock podcast network. I am your friend Joseph Craven. I'm joined by Gray Barnes. Gray, how are you today?
I'm doing well. I'm well rested, I guess you could say. I missed the appointment for the podcast to begin because I was taking a nap. So you are getting the 100% fully charged version of Gray Barnes this evening, or whenever you're listening to this podcast.
You had yourself a little afternoon bye week is what you had. That's all that is.
Yeah, that's all that is. We all deserve one every season, at least.
Exactly. Mississippi State, of course, the Dogs coming off a bye week. The podcast coming off a bye week, kind of unintentionally. Just got super busy with my schedule this past week and didn't have time to fit in a recording session. But because it was a bye week and we weren't going to miss anything that weekend, I also enjoyed the time off. Maybe just needed to take an extra week to deal with the embarrassment against Auburn. Obviously, a 56-23 loss there for the Dogs heading into the bye week. I'm sure we'll talk a lot about some of the specifics of the game and some of the stuff that went wrong, blah, 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 blah. But something I'm curious about, because we kind of sort of mentioned this very briefly on the big show, the full ROTC roundtable discussion that was released on Monday this week. But the philosophy from the Joe Moorhead coaching staff going into like the game against Auburn and some of the other games that we've seen so far in his brief year and a half here, the philosophy seems to be that when he's given the opportunity to, like, he knows he can win, he's going to go hard after that. And if it's kind of like probably not going to happen, maybe the strategy is not quite as like aggressive or as streamlined as it tends to be. I say that when you compare it to Auburn of last season, where before the game we talked about how unique the strategy was, how prepared the team was, and how like they ran a specific offense that worked against Auburn's strengths, all of that. Versus this season where he's got a lot of players suspended and he's not playing suspended players in questionable games. He's playing the suspended players in like sure victories or like very winnable games in order to make sure that victories do happen. What do you think of what appears to be the strategy here this season, that Moorhead is going to go all out on the games that he looks at and says, yes, that should be a victory, and maybe not the same way against games where it's probably a loss? Do you see that? Do you see any truth in that hypothesis I just threw out there?
Yeah, I mean, regardless of, when these suspended players are playing, I mean, they each get 4 games this season to play. Whether he really intends to have that message come across or not, it just is, just by the nature of the situation. It's just kind of, it's just a weird place to be in. But I do think that playing Willie Gay, Marcus Murphy, Devontae Jason, I guess, on special teams. I don't really know what their plan with him is.
He doesn't. He's a weird one because he seems to just kind of like pop up as a returner, and you're like, oh, is it okay?
Yeah, I forgot about you.
Yeah, all right, cool.
I think that he has decided to play those guys in the swing games / the games that mean the most to the fan base. Yeah. Which I think is a smart move. I mean, we all know that this is kind of a transition year anyways. Before the season really began, I mean, we talked about what the ceiling might be for the team and what the floor might be for the
Right.
team. And it's just right now you just have to make sure that you at least hit the floor. You know
Right.
what I'm trying to say? You don't want it to start a downward trend. So win the games that you're supposed to win, which I think, Tennessee, Arkansas, Ole Miss would be those games, in my opinion.
I mean, don't overlook Abilene Christian.
Sorry, I did. But I won't in the future. I apologize. I mean, you got to play those guys in those games, or you will have an even more, what's the word I'm looking for? Just a fan base looking for something to be positive about for the future. So I think he's doing the smart thing, but at the same time, it does show a little bit of timidness almost. I don't know.
Yeah.
What do you think?
Well, that's what I can't decide. I can't figure out how much of it might be on his shoulders and how much of it might just be that's what the hand he's been dealt with these suspensions this year. Right? I mean, these players did something stupid and got punished for it, and so the teams have to, suffer in that regard, which is a shame, but that's just kind of what he's been dealt. So he's going to have to, try to use the personnel the best way he can. That's what coaches are paid to do. At the very end of the day,
tough decisions. Yeah.
At the end of the day, coaches are paid to make the decisions and to use personnel in the ways that suit them best. I think that's why we didn't see any of Willie Gay until the Kentucky game. And I think that's why we're going to see Willie Gay this weekend. That's just kind of what, that's the hand Moorhead has been dealt. And for better or worse, whether he's handled it well or not, he kind of has to make these decisions on, okay, well, what games are more of a priority? Are we going to try to play all of our best players against LSU when, there's a slim chance of victory, and you want to gamble on maybe pulling off a massive upset? No, you probably want to stick with the lower risk, lower reward, and make sure that you don't drop out of bowl contention.
Yeah.
That's the sensible thing to do, but it's not sexy, and it certainly does not sit well with emotional fans most of the time. And we saw that after the Auburn game. I mean, what's your take on some of the fan outrage that has happened after Auburn, for example? Because it was an embarrassing game.
Yeah, that's the word.
Yeah, that's the word for it. That's the operative word here. I mean, 6 minutes in, down 21-0. And once that happens, I think even Moorhead himself said it. Once that happens, you're done. You just know you're done. So the fan base is embarrassed by that, and the fan base gets emotional. The fan base, at least parts of the fan base, have large outbursts against Joe Moorhead because of that. What's your take on some of the reactions that we've seen? Do you think any of it's justified?
I mean, you got to think some of it is. I mean, just by what you said, 6 minutes into the game, you're down 21-0. But not only are you down 21-0, the way that you got there was just bizarre. It was like none of the players were quite ready for an SEC road atmosphere. I mean, you start off with a delay of the game.
Yep.
And then you get a delay of game on a punt, back in your own end zone. I mean, how does that happen?
Yeah. Good Lord.
you get you fumble a kickoff return. It just, how you got to that point where there really was no coming back was just so embarrassing. I mean, it was just unpreparedness.
Yep.
I don't. there's no other way to put it. I think some of that reaction is warranted.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, then again, you saw later on in the game, there were some positives to bring out of it.
Sure.
It was just a shame that you dug yourself a hole so deep that really a lot of that is overlooked. But I mean, at the end of the day, it's about wins and losses, not about, some peak moments in a game that looks really good. But that's got to change. And hopefully we see that, that change a little bit this weekend. I don't know if a road game at Tennessee at 11 a.m. is going to be
Is it another stupid 11 a.m. kickoff?
It sure is.
Oh, my gosh.
Yeah. Neyland Stadium might not even be half full. I would imagine.
Not a chance. Not a chance. And even if it is, I don't think they're going to be doing anything but calling for their coach's head, probably.
Yeah,
this is the battle of disgruntled fan bases this weekend, apparently.
And it's a big game for both fan bases. It really is. There's a lot riding on this game.
Yeah.
You could literally see Knoxville implode upon itself.
You just
this
might.
Weekend.
Because they have to be, after looking at like a decent start against Georgia, they have to be looking at this and just saying, okay, this is a winnable game, the same way that Mississippi State's looking at it and saying this is a winnable game. Right. I'm with you. I'm completely with you on the fact that there have to be some elements of the frustration that is justified. I don't see anything that justifies at this point right now calling for coaches to be fired like some people are. Yeah. I don't understand that. I just don't understand that at all. When you've got, and I say that as someone that was very frustrated last season when I felt like Moorhead mishandled the personnel that he had inherited, right? At this point, that's not the issue. The issue is he is getting his guys in and he's fully establishing his strategy and his foundation for what he's building. So, I'm fine with seeing, a loss, but maybe Garrett Schrader looks good in the loss and throws for 200 yards and 2 touchdowns against an incredible defense, that sort of thing. So along with that, on the other end with Bob Shoop, people want to get super mad at Bob Shoop right now. Shoop's returning. We counted it up. I say 2.5 starters because I don't think Leo Lewis counts as a full player. I think he's just a half player because that's about how much of the game Leo Lewis shows up to play in week in, week out. But this defense, between suspensions and graduation, lost Jamal Peters, Mark McLaurin, Jonathan Abram, Montez Sweat, Jeffrey Simmons, Braxton Hoyette, Jerry Green. I feel like I'm overlooking someone else. That's 7 of them.
You say Corey Thomas?
I didn't say Corey Thomas. Forgot about Corey Thomas even. Because I was just trying to count starters themselves, but Corey Thomas was our primary, he was our primary interior lineman on that, lineup B line? That lineup
squad.
The B squad, And then with suspension, you've got Willie Gay out most of the time as well. And with suspension, you've also got Lee Autry, who would have been the most experienced interior defensive lineman, out as well, Yeah. Between all of that, that is 9 players that were either starters or the key second stringers that are out or suspended, that are gone entirely or suspended. Man, I was confident in this defense at the beginning of the season, and then this just knowing that what was returning, but then the suspensions happened, and I don't think I quite fully prepared myself.
I don't think anybody did, to be quite honest.
I didn't realize just how much of an impact not having Willie Gay, Lee Autry out there on a consistent basis was going to have, but apparently it does. Even just those 2 guys. That's insane. But yeah, so I don't understand calling for coaches' heads necessarily. You know?
Well, yeah, like I don't mean to interrupt, but
Yeah.
the peak moments that you see in the game are the moments where Moorhead is injecting himself into the team, like Garrett Schrader having, kind of had a couple of breakout performances.
Mm-hmm.
You're seeing Kylan Hill just being Kylan Hill.
Yeah.
And the valleys of games are when you see moments of an inexperienced defensive line where the cupboard was left empty behind those, Montez Sweat and Jeffrey Simmons and Corey Thomas and Gary Green and all those guys. It was left pretty bare. I mean, defensive line and wide receivers after Dan Mullen left was just a lot of really young, inexperienced, not very highly recruited guys.
Yeah.
And those are the toys that he's having to work with. And it's really unfair to really expect anything significant out of those players, especially, the first half of a season. So, I mean, I don't know. I just think that where Moorhead is really putting a stamp on this team, you're seeing improvement, but areas where he's going to have to just get on that recruiting trail and get some more of these defensive linemen in, receivers that fit his system come in, and that's going to take time.
Yeah.
And it's unfair to just be calling for a coach's job halfway into his second year.
Yeah. That's the stuff that doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah. But the unpreparedness at Auburn, that in my opinion, is pretty, it's fair to have some criticism for a lot of that.
Yes. I am never going to fault anyone for their criticism of that particular game, because it was, as we've said it, embarrassing. It just was. But like, it's another one of those situations. I think so much of the frustration at the coaches is probably it's leftover frustration from people being mad at Dan Mullen for leaving. It's just leftover. We did not want to have to go through another transitional phase. We wanted to be able to keep consistency going. And because of that, then people are acting like, well, you know what? Dan Mullen never lost to Auburn when he was here. And so it's inexcusable. No, Mullen lost to Auburn all the time.
Had a lot of performances like that against Auburn at home.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Let's not forget the embarrassing moments that happened under Mullen, going all the way up to like his final game coaching at Mississippi State. The Fitzgerald injury and Mullen just quitting on the team in the process is embarrassing. So that's how his tenure ended.
Yep.
And so I feel like sometimes we get too emotional, and that's what we dwell on, is like, well, you know what, we romanticize the former regime a little bit more, about like, because we were mad that he left. And so we were like, oh, well, you know what, Mullen would never have done this. No, he would have. And he did,
Yeah. And he did. And we've gotten so used to consistency, where if there's anything that kind of breaks the norm of what, the fan base has experienced for the previous 9 years.
Yep.
It's going to kind of shock you into what is going on here. I'm not used to seeing this.
Yep. Which is also kind of a good thing, that the expectations are not what they used to be. The expectations are not, oh, well, maybe we'll make it to a bowl game. That would be nice. The expectations are, you are going to get to a bowl game, bare minimum. We don't miss bowls these days. And so the frustration at maybe that streak coming close to coming to an end, of course, is at, or that's one of the things that feeds into the fan base's frustration, which I totally get, totally understand. And it's a good place to be. Truth be told, we're in a healthy place as a program. We actually have a school president and an athletic director, unlike some places. No other comment needed. Anyway, we have that. And so we have a foundation for, continued success. So the fact that a coach leaves and the replacement is a guy who's having to kind of learn the SEC, but also really learn real Division I football head coaching, it makes it super frustrating for everyone. I fully support him. I think he is more than capable. I think, he's a guy who will be a great coach, but he's a guy that we have to be realistic with in his first. This is his first real year. Honestly, last year, he wandered into whatever was left for him. This is his first real year to get started, and sucks that it's more of a rebuild than we would have wanted. But at the same time, the end result should be good in another year or so. So I don't know. It's tricky. It's it's very tricky to navigate.
And there's no doubt that Moorhead can coach and he can scheme. Oh, yeah. He can scheme a team to a win. I mean, he's proven that before. I don't think any one player last season won the matchup with Auburn. I think that win was squared solely on Joe Moorhead's game plan that he brought out.
No question.
So, I mean, he definitely has the knowledge and the experience to game plan for a team and exploit weaknesses. It's just all about getting his personnel in there, and that takes time. It takes time to change a program like that. So, I mean, he's got my support too, and it's going to be interesting to see what the team does coming off of a bye week in Knoxville.
Yeah, for sure. Especially after Tennessee showed a little bit of a different look than they have, last week with like different quarterback playing and all of that, and so we're going to be a different thing to kind of prepare for. But yeah, he's got the know-how. He's got the smarts for it. He's lacked the personnel. And so if you give him time to collect the personnel that he wants, you're already seeing that in Garrett Schrader. And you're already seeing that in the offensive line, like recruits. And the offensive line, which was a huge disappointment last season, being entirely different this season. You're already seeing some of that. So it'll be cool to see what happens here. It's just we got used to certain things. We got used to a dominant defensive line under Mullen, who I think that was something that was always overlooked under his tenure, was just how Mississippi State became defensive line
Yeah.
In fact, shout out to Braxton Hoyette. I looked up to see where he ended up, and he is currently on the Chiefs practice squad.
Yeah, I saw that.
I know he had gotten some attention. I think he even got some attention from the Titans. Like, I think they drafted Simmons and then brought him in as like an undrafted free agent. But now he's actually over in Kansas City. So,
yeah, that's kind of cool going from a team that's kind of starting to build around some Mississippi boys and going to a team where a Mississippi State standout is kind of the star of the defense over there. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah. I mean, they have a chance if Breland Speaks is currently out on the injured reserve list, but they have a chance if Speaks is healthy and with Hoyette there to have like a potential of 3 Mississippi school products on their defensive line, not to mention Martinez Rankin is on their offensive line.
Oh
So,
yeah, I forgot about that trade.
yeah, he came over in the trade with the Texans. So the Texans moved from having 3 Mississippi State players on their roster to sending one of them over to the Chiefs, who have 3 Mississippi State players on their roster.
And that kind of brings me back to the whole consistency thing. I mean, Dan Mullen put a lot of talent in the NFL. I mean,
Yeah.
for goodness sake, I mean, you see starting quarterback for the Dallas Cowboys. I mean, probably the premier position in sports. I mean, just about. I mean, I never would have dreamed, like as a kid, that I would ever see that. Especially with some of the teams I had to grow up watching. Which how I'm a Mississippi State fan, I'm not really too sure. Those are some lean times, but it's. I think the fan base is just really just kind of scared of losing what we've been used to.
Yes, that is exactly what it is. We're nervous that we are going to, that our expectations are at where they are because we're nervous that we're going to slide back to where they used to be.
Yeah.
And I don't think that we will as a program. I just don't see it. But we might if we give up on Moorhead really quickly. And that's the tricky thing, is trying to convince people, don't do it. I know you're mad because you're afraid this might happen, but it will happen if you do what you're doing. Like, consistency goes a long way, even just in sticking with the coach that you hired a lot of times.
And right now you're seeing that it is not easy to find a head coach to maintain where a program was coming from. I mean, it is extremely difficult. I mean, you're seeing that with Jeremy Pruitt, with Justin Fuente at Virginia Tech. I mean, and Fuente, I mean, he was the hottest commodity, head coaching commodity several years ago. And he's struggling at Virginia Tech. Honestly, I think, I hate to keep using this word, but they are probably the most consistent program since probably I was born. They had the same coach for who knows how long. They consistently were at the top or near the top of the Big East, or I guess now it's, they're part of the ACC.
Right.
And now they're struggling with a guy that everybody thought extremely highly of.
Yeah.
So don't wish for something that the odds are telling you is probably not going to work out for the better.
Yeah.
Have faith in the guy that's running your program right now, because there's not a whole lot to really be extremely negative about.
No.
There was an embarrassing performance. And I'm sure we'll get corrected. And there's building blocks for Garrett Schrader is a freshman.
Yeah. A true freshman.
And he's a true freshman.
Yep.
I mean, that right there is a cornerstone for a program. So just have faith, guys.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. I get the frustration. I don't get what you have to avoid doing, basically in all situations, is acting purely off of an emotional reaction to something, but that's what we get so much in sports these days. I mean, that you turn on ESPN at any point in time, and what are you going to see? You turn on ESPN, you turn on Fox Sports, at any point in time, you're going to see talking heads that the networks pay a lot of money to make very emotional, ridiculous statements to generate ratings and buzz. And that's it. And so because of that, I think that it is encouraged, that and like social media and living in like just the outrage era, which is not a topic I expected to get into on a sports podcast, but I'm in it now. But that has, I think, encouraged all of us to respond more vocally and negatively to sports moments that frustrate or embarrass us. it's always been a heated thing. You go back to the early 1900s where fans are breaking the bleachers and beating each other with them at egg bowls, or before it was the egg bowl. You go back to those stories. It's always been heated. Sports fans have always been heated. And then you just kind of get into where we are right now as a culture, where we're encouraged to be very vocal in how pissed we are all the time. And this is what you get. And so you have to be able to temper some of that down. You just have to. So I think you're right about the fact that you have to appreciate getting a coaching hire where maybe things don't become terrible. You have to keep your expectations at a particular level. You look at Virginia Tech. Yeah, I looked at it. Frank Beamer was at Virginia Tech from 1987 until 2015. So almost 30 years at Virginia Tech. And took them to bowl games from 1993 till he left in 2015.
Yeah.
So, which is insanity. But a lot of that is because they trusted him to stay consistent. And maybe there were years in which they won 10 and 11 games. Maybe there were years they only won 7 or 8 games. But they trusted him to keep consistent. Southern Miss, Jeff Bauer, winning seasons for a long, long time. The fans get expectations in a weird area. They get frustrated at the coach for being, stagnant, I guess. Southern Miss has been a mess ever since. Tennessee, our opponents this weekend. They honestly have some decent years under Butch Jones. Mm-hmm. I just drew a blank on his name for a minute. They have some decent years under Butch Jones. Not only do they have decent years under Butch, they also have good recruiting classes under Butch. They have, what is it? He gets there 5-7, 6 or 7-6, 9-4, back-to-back 9-4 years. And back-to-back 9-4 years are not enough for them to overlook a 4-6 start his next season.
Man.
And so then they, go to what they are right now. A 1-4 team because they decided that wasn't enough. Let's jump to somebody else and give a guy only about 4 years or something. And I know we don't want to be patient in sports, but you kind of have to in order to establish anything.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's weird. The year they reached number 9 in the top 25 polls the year before they canned him.
Man.
That makes no sense to me.
That doesn't make any sense.
It still makes no sense to me. Anyway, 3 straight bowl victories.
It's not enough.
3 straight bowl victories. It's not enough. And they fire him and they get Pruitt, who is proving. So then, you've had to go literally within these years, you've had to go one massive philosophy change from Dooley to Jones. Then from Jones to that brief Brady Hoke interim, whatever.
Oh, man, I forgot about that.
Yeah, Brady Hoke was there for a couple of games, lost them both. Wow. And now a complete philosophy change again to Jeremy Pruitt. There's so much. They've gone through so much. And so you look at it now, and they're just not threatening anybody as a program. And part of it is, a lot of it is self-inflicted.
Yeah.
All right, that was a long rant that I went on about coaching. But consistency is one of those things that I harp on all the time in this podcast. So I'm going to go ahead and say something about how football games are won and lost at the line of scrimmage. And there we go. I basically hit on every cliche that I mentioned every single episode on running out the clock.
You bring it up so much. It must be true, right?
It's almost, or at least I've just convinced myself it's true.
Yeah.
All right, let's look at Tennessee this weekend as a team, as our opponents in general. They are currently sitting at 1-4. They have, let's see. Obviously they had, oh yeah, there he is. Brian Maurer, I think it was how he was pronounced. Brian Maurer, Brian Hartmurmer was stepped in as quarterback against Georgia this past weekend. I'm going to pull up those stats real quick. I should have had them in front of me, and I did not. They got off to a decent little start before eventually getting thwomped by Georgia at the end there. Let's see. They kept it. Yeah, they actually had a lead at the beginning of the second quarter, 14-10, before it went to be all Georgia for the rest of the game. Now, granted, Georgia is obviously one of the top teams, not just in the conference, but the entire country. So it kind of was inevitable that Georgia would eventually pull away in that regard. But it was kind of startling that Tennessee started off well. And part of that was because of the play of their youngster, their young quarterback, who is he a freshman? Yeah, he's a freshman too, Brian Maurer. So he steps up, gets their only touchdowns of the game. One of them being a pass that went for 73 yards when all was said and done, and seems to kind of inject a little bit of life in them, but at the end of the day, Tennessee also still gets beaten and maybe or maybe not has shown any signs of improving as a team after that hot start. Do you feel like you really know anything about this Tennessee team?
Juwan Jennings and Marquez Callaway are pretty good. Other than that, not really. They don't really have much of a ground attack going. Jarrett Garantano, if they decide to play him this week, hasn't ever really been anything to write home about. It's going to be interesting to see if Tennessee kind of goes with the trend in the SEC of hey, just ride the young freshman. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because Maurer, I mean, he gave something I think that Tennessee fans are kind of looking for is just give me something to believe in.
Exactly.
You know what I mean?
Exactly. Just something to actually go right.
Yeah. And they've got a couple of guys on the outside who have made plays in their careers. I mean, Juwan Jennings is he's a good receiver. They got a couple of pieces that I think that they can highlight. And other than that, I mean, that's really all I know about Tennessee. I mean, I've watched probably, I don't know, 2 or 3 quarters worth of Tennessee play so far this season, and nothing really stands out to you. Obviously, this upcoming weekend, I hope that Maurer doesn't get the start and just have a breakout performance or anything like that. But if I was a Tennessee fan, that's kind of what I would be wanting to see, is just something to get excited about. Because if not, there really isn't anything to get excited about, and there's a whole lot to get frustrated and get hot-headed about.
Yeah, exactly.
So yeah, I don't really know a whole lot about what's going on over there at Tennessee, other than they're kind of just stuck in a rut, which makes me nervous going into the weekend because you don't want to have a bad performance against a team who's struggling like that. But
yeah. But I mean, going back to what we were saying earlier, both teams probably look at this as a winnable game. And are going to try to do everything they can to make it a winnable game. Tennessee more stuck in a rut than Mississippi State may be, but Mississippi State definitely frustrated and in a frustrating position right now. So it's much more worrisome than it should be. You know, like this should not, on paper, be a game that gives you much concern when you look at when you just look at Tennessee as a team. I mean, I'm pulling up their statistics right now, and they're just not necessarily doing much of anything well, right?
Right. Yeah.
I mean, between okay, let's just do a side-by-side comparison of the two teams. As of now, Schrader has been completing about 59% of his passes for 511 yards, only the 2 touchdown passes. And those were both last week. But, on the flip side of that, Guarantano was doing a little bit better in completion percentage. Has 750 passing yards, 7 touchdowns, 4 interceptions, and that's through more playing time and all of that. You look at on the ground, Ty Chandler looks pretty good, 320 yards and 2 touchdowns. Eric Gray 170, Tim Jordan. I mean, it's just offense just kind of looks okay. Nothing stands out. Nothing stands out. Nothing. But they also don't look as much like pushovers, maybe, as you'd think, partly because, nothing on Mississippi State's defense stands out. So I guess the question is,
my 11-year-old MacBook is struggling.
Oh, man. I guess the question is, if we're talking about two teams that are fairly underwhelming, fairly young, especially in Mississippi State's case, fairly understaffed, especially Mississippi State's defensive case.
Not right.
So the question at the end of the day then there becomes, and I feel like we all predicted Mississippi State to walk away with the victory this season, just because they seem to be slightly more stable, even with all the question marks, slightly more talented between Hill and the way Schrader is playing. And even, I mean, if Tommy Stevens ends up, needing to play or something, there's a lot of confidence in what Tommy brings to the team from a passing standpoint. So you've got all that in mind. I mean, what is your confidence level of concerning a Mississippi State victory when you get going into this weekend now?
I'm pretty confident. A lot of that has to do with having that extra week to prepare. A lot of it is coming from what Moorhead put together with a bye week last year, and his ability to game plan to a win. And then, I mean, just plain and simple, we're playing Tennessee. I mean, I know that's kind of a cop-out answer, but I think we're going to be able to score. Kylan Hill he's definitely a top 3 back in the SEC, if not the best back in the SEC. If you put him on, an Alabama or an LSU or an Auburn, I mean, he'd be just as good, if not better.
Yeah.
I think we're going to be able to score. Defense might give up, 24 points maybe. I still don't think that's going to be close to enough. I think
we could see the opposite of the Auburn scoreline.
We could see the opposite. Yeah, I really do think that's possible.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think State scores a lot. I think it could be a 38-42 to somewhere between 38-42 to 24, something like that. That's kind of what I'm thinking.
Yeah, it wouldn't surprise me. The most amount of points that State has scored, obviously, is 38 points so far this year in the season opener and then the second week against USM. But, last week, was at 23 points, still, the least amount of points by a whopping 1 point. Otherwise, State has scored at least, 24 points in the loss to Kansas State, 23 in the loss to Auburn. Kind of seems like as long as we score more than 24 points, we're winning the game.
Yeah. I think I think a lot of that has to do with if Schrader gets the start, which I kind of am inclined to believe.
I see no reason to believe otherwise. Yeah,
having that quarterback run capability at least leaves a lot of room for other playmakers too. So I'm looking for a big game on the ground and maybe some play action, deep shots down the field. I've probably got like a 9 out of 10 confidence going into the game. What do you think?
I don't know if I feel quite that high on it, but yeah, I don't see any reason to not be confident. And I feel like, and I think I said this on the big pod the other day. I might not have, but yeah, I just kind of feel like I see no reason to that this would not be a pretty sizable Mississippi State victory. Even with all the factors going into it of an away game against an opponent that might have gotten a little bit of confidence last week, but I don't know how much confidence you can actually get just from playing okay for a quarter against Georgia.
Yeah.
I think we're kind of overblowing that a little bit. And so I just see like this is that there's going to be a more motivated and a more focused Mississippi State team. A lot of that behind a coach who looks at it and goes, okay, I know what we need to do to win, and here's what we're going to do. And I think that's all the stuff that we've talked about so far in this podcast is what makes me feel more confident. I'd put it at like a 7.5 out of 10.
Yeah. But you also got the wild card factors in there with more than likely having these suspended players playing.
Exactly.
That also kind of gives me a little bit of a bump because when Willie Gay's been out there, he's been outstanding. So that kind of bumps my confidence up a little bit too.
His presence in the first half against Kentucky took that defense to a respectable enough level. That's incredible to me that his presence made that first half against Kentucky. They looked all right as an entire defensive unit.
Yeah.
And then when he was kicked out of the game, the entire defense changed for the rest of the matchup. It was crazy to see that.
Yeah. They lost that kind of swagger. He really kind of brings that juice to the defense. Yeah. When he was gone, it was a completely different trying to find the word. It just looked like a different defense.
Yeah.
So he is a cog in the machine. He's always near the ball, always looking to make a big play. Extremely physical, extremely athletic. He's just got it all. At a linebacker position, which on a Bob Shoot defense is so important. Having an athletic linebacker and kind of that nickel safety hybrid in Brian Cole. So I'm looking forward to see what Willie Gay does this weekend if he does in fact play.
Surely he will. I mean,
yeah.
Who else? I mean, maybe A&M. Maybe if we feel like his presence in A&M is going to be like the deciding point, then maybe he plays against A&M. But like, it's a must win against Tennessee, essentially. So he's got to play. And like you said, probably the Egg Bowl, like the Tennessee and the Egg Bowl are probably the two must win. We'll most likely see our suspended players play matchups on the season. I don't see any reason why not. All right. Whew, I think we're going to wrap things up here. We've had a handful of technical difficulties that delayed our recording process. We have the fact that I'm honestly just sick. So my energy level has taken a massive nosedive in about the past 10, 15 minutes. And so I think we're going to wrap up this episode here. If there's anything that we can say to Mississippi State fans who listen to this, so, like one, maybe two people, if there's anything that we can say, we just got to bear with this season. Just got to get through this season. Chances are we win the games we're supposed to. That's Tennessee, Arkansas, Abilene Christian, and Ole Miss. Still got to consider those to be games that we feel like we should win. And if we win those 4, what do you know? That's a 7-win season. And that's what we were talking about from the beginning. So this is a huge weekend, whether we wanted to admit it or not. But feel good about our chances. We just got to weather the storm. Gray, thank you for jumping on this episode once again of the Weekly Pessimist.
Yes, sir. Thank you for having me. And go Dogs. Let's get it done in Knoxville this weekend.
Absolutely. Hail State forever. And we'll catch you next time on the Weekly Pessimist presented by Running Out the Clock Sports.